Every time he gets rejected by a girl, his power multiplies, and now he's too strong to find a girlfriend. I'm your anime, and let's go. Imagine having a superpower that makes you stronger every single time a girl rejects you. Sounds amazing, right? Except now you're so ridiculously overpowered that every woman you approach either faints from your overwhelming presence or falls obsessively in love before you can even have a normal conversation. This is the story of Kenji Matsuda, who went from the weakest guy in his school to literally the strongest being on the planet. And the tragic irony is that his power has made it impossible to achieve the one thing he actually wants: a genuine romantic relationship with someone who sees him as a person and not a god. Before we dive into this hilariously tragic journey, smash that like button if you've ever felt like success in one area ruined your chances in another. Hit subscribe because we cover the most creative power system stories every week, and drop a comment telling me what superpower would absolutely backfire on you. Now let's get into this masterpiece of ironic suffering. Kenji Matsuda is 17 years old and the definition of average. Average height, average grades, average looks, average everything. He's not bullied, but he's not popular either. He exists in that middle zone where people know his name but wouldn't miss him if he transferred schools. The only remarkable thing about Kenji is his complete and total lack of success with girls. He's been rejected 23 times. He keeps count because each rejection stings, not because he's in love with any of these girls, but because each no reinforces that he's forgettable, unremarkable, the kind of guy girls don't even consider. His 24th rejection happens on a Monday morning. A girl named Yuki from his class. He's been working up courage for weeks. Finally asks her to the school festival. She looks surprised he even approached her. Says she's flattered, but no, she has someone else she likes. Kenji thanks her politely and walks away. Just another rejection. Just another confirmation that he's average. He goes to the bathroom, splashes water on his face, looks at himself in the mirror, and something changes. He feels different, stronger somehow. His reflection looks the same, but he feels like something shifted inside him. He flexes his hand experimentally. It feels powerful, more powerful than it should. He dismisses it, probably just adrenaline from the rejection. But during gym class that afternoon, Kenji discovers it's not adrenaline. They're doing fitness tests, push-ups. He normally manages maybe 15 before his arms give out. Today he doesn't stop at 15, or 20, or 30. He keeps going until the gym teacher tells him to stop at 100. His arms aren't even tired. The other students stare. Kenji stares at his own arms. What just happened? That night, Kenji experiments in his room. Push-ups, sit-ups, lifting weights. He's definitely stronger than he was yesterday. Significantly stronger. He can lift his bed with one hand, can do a handstand push-up without training. His body has changed overnight. He tries to think what could have caused this. The only unusual thing that happened was Yuki's rejection. But that's stupid. Getting rejected doesn't make you stronger. That's not how reality works. Except apparently it is. Because the next day, Kenji asks another girl out, Ayame from the art club. She says no. She doesn't date underclassmen. Kenji feels that shift again. That surge of power. He goes to the gym and tests himself. He's even stronger. Can bench press twice his body weight now. Can run 100 meters in under 11 seconds. This is impossible, but it's happening. Kenji realizes with growing excitement that he's discovered a superpower. Every rejection makes him stronger. This changes everything. Over the next month, Kenji systematically asks out every girl in school. Not because he actually wants to date them all, but because each rejection is a power-up. He becomes shameless about it. Asks out girls he knows will say no. Gets rejected. Gets stronger. The pattern is consistent. Every rejection multiplies his power by approximately 1.5. After 10 rejections, he can bench press a car. After 20, he can punch through concrete. After 30, he's faster than Olympic sprinters. The school starts noticing. Kenji goes from forgettable to freakishly athletic overnight. He joins the track team and breaks every school record. Joins the boxing club and knocks out their best fighter with a casual jab. Teachers start watching him. Students whisper. Some think he's on drugs. Others think he's always been this good and just hiding it. Only Kenji knows the truth. He's farming rejections like experience points in a video game. And it's working. He's becoming powerful beyond his wildest dreams. But there's a problem emerging. As Kenji gets stronger and more confident, girls start saying yes. The 40th girl he asks, Misa from the volleyball team, doesn't reject him. She says yes. She'd love to go out. Kenji is caught off guard. He didn't actually want to date her. He wanted the rejection, but he can't just say, never mind. That would be cruel. So he goes on one date with Misa. It's awkward. He's distracted thinking about his power. She can tell he's not really interested. After the date, she says they should just be friends. It's basically a rejection, but his power doesn't activate. Apparently, it only works if the rejection comes before any relationship forms. First rejections only. Kenji realizes he needs to be more careful. He can't accidentally start dating people. He needs pure rejections. So he adjusts his strategy. He asks out girls who are clearly out of his league, the most popular girls, the ones who would never say yes. But something strange happens. These girls don't reject him immediately anymore. They see this confident, powerful guy and they're intrigued. They ask him to tell them more about himself, want to get to know him. Kenji is frustrated. His power made him attractive, and attractiveness is ruining his power growth. He needs to be rejected, but he's becoming too desirable to reject. It's a paradox he didn't anticipate. After 50 rejections and 50 power multiplications, Kenji is no longer human in any normal sense. He can jump over buildings, can punch through steel. His reflexes are so fast he can catch arrows. He's basically a superhero, and he's still just 17, still in high school, still trying to figure out how to keep growing his power. The problem is finding girls who will reject him. He starts expanding his search, goes to other schools, asks out college girls, even approaches women in the street. Most reject him. He's a random teenager approaching strangers? That's creepy. The rejections continue. The power grows. At 70 rejections, Kenji is the strongest person on Earth. He can lift buses, can run at highway speeds, can take bullets without flinching. He's not just strong, he's invincible. And that's when things start going wrong. Very wrong. Kenji is now 18 and has been rejected 100 times. Each rejection multiplied his power exponentially. He's no longer just the strongest human. He's broken physics. He can fly by pushing off air molecules, can see across miles, can hear conversations from kilometers away. His body is so dense, he weighs 3,000 pounds but looks normal. He has to be careful not to break everything he touches. Normal chairs collapse under him. His bed frame is custom reinforced steel. He can't shake hands without crushing bones. His power has become a curse. But worse than the physical problems is the romantic problem. He's now so powerful that his mere presence affects people. He radiates energy, a pressure that makes normal humans uncomfortable. When he walks into a room, everyone feels it. An instinctive recognition that something incredibly dangerous is near. Women especially react strongly. Some are attracted to the power, drawn to him like moths to flame. They confess love without knowing him, fall obsessively for him based purely on his aura. Others are terrified, run away when he approaches. Neither reaction is useful. He can't get genuine rejections anymore. The women who aren't scared are too infatuated to say no. The women who are scared won't let him get close enough to ask. His power broke the system that created it. Kenji tries to suppress his aura, to seem normal, but it doesn't work. His power leaks out. People sense it subconsciously. He's tried wearing baggy clothes, acting weak, pretending to be sick. Nothing works. His fundamental nature has changed. He's too powerful to hide. He goes to a remote mountain, tries to live as a hermit. Surely isolation will reset something. But even there, hikers who pass by sense his presence. Some become devotees, camp outside his cave, worship him as a mountain spirit. Others flee in terror, report supernatural phenomena to authorities. Kenji returns to civilization more frustrated than ever. He's achieved ultimate power but lost what he actually wanted. Connection, relationship, love. The irony is crushing. He became strong to prove he wasn't forgettable, to show that he could be someone. But now he's too much, too powerful, too overwhelming. People can't relate to him, can't see him as human. He's become exactly what he feared. Unreachable, untouchable, forever alone. At 150 rejections, Kenji decides to try something desperate. He'll find the one woman on Earth who can reject him despite his power, who can see past the overwhelming presence to the lonely teenager underneath. He searches for years, travels the world, meets thousands of women. Some worship him, some fear him. None reject him. None say no. They can't. His power won't let them. If they're not scared away immediately, they're too enthralled to refuse. The paradox is complete. His power made rejection impossible, But without rejection, his power can't grow. And without growth, he can't find a way to reverse this. He's trapped at maximum strength with no off switch, no way to seem weak, no way to be normal. He's become the thing he least wanted to be: powerful, impressive, completely and utterly alone. Years pass. Kenji is now 25. He's given up on relationships, accepted his fate. He uses his power for good at least, stops disasters, saves lives, becomes a vigilante hero that government can't control. People call him Guardian, the unstoppable protector. He's famous, beloved by millions, and more lonely than he was at 17, because at least back then people saw him as human. Now they see him as a god, and you can't date a god. You can only worship or fear. Neither is love. Kenji wishes he could go back, be average again, be forgettable. He'd trade all his power for one genuine conversation with a woman who isn't affected by his presence. One real connection, one honest rejection would be better than 1,000 false acceptances. But that option is gone, closed forever. His power grew too much, became self-reinforcing. He's stuck at the peak with no way down, the strongest being alive, the loneliest person on Earth. That's when he meets Akari. If you're completely hooked on this tragically ironic story and want to see if Kenji ever finds someone who can actually say no to him, hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed, because this gets even more insane. Trust me, wait until you see how Kenji tries to solve this impossible problem. Let's continue. Akari Tanaka is 23 years old and completely blind. She lost her sight in an accident when she was 12. She navigates the world through sound, touch, and an incredible spatial awareness she developed over years. She can't see Kenji's overwhelming presence, can't perceive the aura that makes everyone else react. To her, he's just a man with a deep voice and heavy footsteps. Kenji meets her at a library. He's there researching myths about power removal. She's there for audiobooks. They literally bump into each other. Kenji's so used to people sensing him and avoiding that he's not prepared for someone to walk right into him. She apologizes. He apologizes. And something remarkable happens. She doesn't react, doesn't run away, doesn't fall to her knees confessing love. She just treats him like a normal person who accidentally blocked her path. Kenji is stunned. He asks if she needs help. She politely declines, says she knows the library layout. He watches her navigate perfectly with her cane, realizes she can't see, can't perceive what everyone else does. She's immune. Kenji starts visiting the library every day, makes excuses to talk to Akari. She's friendly but reserved, doesn't warm to him immediately, doesn't treat him as special. It's the most normal interaction he's had in years. Over weeks, they become friends. Actually friends, not devotees and idols, not hero and fan, just two people who enjoy talking. Akari tells him about her life, her work as a massage therapist, her love of mystery novels, her frustration with people who treat her as fragile because of her blindness. Kenji tells her about himself, carefully. He doesn't mention the power, just says he's been having trouble connecting with people, that he feels isolated. Akari says she understands isolation, that being blind means people often don't see her as a complete person, just the disability. Kenji realizes they have more in common than he expected. 3 months into their friendship, Kenji decides to try. He asks Akari out, on an actual date. His heart is pounding. This is the first time in years he's genuinely wanted someone to say yes, but he also knows what happens if she says yes. His power won't grow. He'll be stuck at this level forever, unless he eventually does something to make her reject him later, which seems cruel. But if she says no, he'll get another multiplication, become even more powerful, even more isolated. It's a catch-22. He wants her to say yes, but saying yes ruins any chance of him ever being normal again. Akari is quiet for a moment. Then she says no, but not because she doesn't like him. She says she's not looking for a relationship right now. She values their friendship, doesn't want to risk it. Kenji feels the power surge, that familiar multiplication. He's stronger again, significantly stronger. But for the first time, the increase doesn't feel like victory. It feels like loss. He just got rejected by the first person he actually wanted to date. The irony is perfect, the cruelty complete. He became strong through rejection. Now he's strong enough that genuine rejection hurts more than all the fake acceptances ever did. Kenji respects Akari's decision, continues being her friend, but the rejection changed something. He's now so powerful that his presence affects reality. When he's emotional, the air pressure shifts. temperature changes. People miles away feel uneasy. He's becoming a natural phenomenon. He has to spend most of his time in isolated areas, empty deserts, uninhabited islands, places where his existence won't disturb people. But he visits Akari weekly, always careful to suppress his power as much as possible. She's the only person who still treats him normally, who doesn't sense what he is. One day, Akari asks him a question. She says she's noticed something. People react to him strangely. Even though she can't see their reactions, she can hear the changes in their voices, the nervousness, the awe. She asks what he really is. Kenji considers lying, but he's tired of hiding. He tells her the truth about the power, the rejections, the multiplications, how he became too strong to live normally, how he's trapped at this level. Akari listens without interrupting. When he finishes, she's quiet for a long moment. Then she says that explains a lot. She asks if that's why he asked her out, because she can't sense his power. Kenji admits yes and no. Yes, she's the only person who might have rejected him genuinely, but also no, because by the time he asked, he actually liked her, wanted her to say yes, even though yes would mean staying powerful forever. Akari says she needs time to think about this, asks him not to visit for a while. Kenji agrees, respects her space, spends the next month in isolation, using his power to help humanity from a distance, stops earthquakes by redistributing tectonic pressure, redirects asteroids, stabilizes the climate. He's become Earth's unofficial guardian, necessary but isolated. Then Akari contacts him, asks to meet. Kenji flies to the library. They sit in their usual spot. Akari says she's thought about his situation a lot. She's realized something. His power is based on rejection. But what if there's another interpretation? What if it's not rejection that powers him? What if it's the act of putting himself out there despite fear of rejection? The courage it takes to ask? The vulnerability? What if the rejections themselves are just the trigger, but the real source is his willingness to be vulnerable repeatedly? Kenji hadn't thought of it that way. Akari continues. She says if that's true, maybe the solution isn't finding someone who can reject or accept him. Maybe it's finding a different way to be vulnerable, to put himself at risk emotionally without romance being involved. Kenji asks what she means. Akari says he should try therapy, actual emotional therapy, opening up to a professional about his loneliness, his fears, his pain. It's a different kind of vulnerability than asking someone on a date, but it might trigger the same mechanism that created his power, except in reverse. Kenji is skeptical, but desperate. He finds a therapist, Dr. Helena Park. She specializes in superpowered individuals, has seen all kinds of ability-related trauma. Kenji sits in her office, talks about his loneliness, his isolation, the irony of his power, and something unexpected happens. As he opens up, as he makes himself emotionally vulnerable without any romantic context, his power shifts, not multiplying, not growing, but changing. The overwhelming presence starts to retract, not disappearing, but becoming controllable. He can turn it off now, can choose when to radiate power and when to seem normal. It's not complete control, but it's something, a beginning. Dr. Park explains that power often reflects psychological state. His power multiplied with rejection because he associated vulnerability with failure. Each rejection was him failing to connect, so his subconscious gave him strength to compensate. But now he's reframing vulnerability, seeing it as strength, as necessary. His power is adapting, becoming not just strength through rejection, but strength through honest emotional openness. Kenji continues therapy for months, slowly learning to control his presence, to seem normal when he chooses. It's not perfect. Sometimes his emotions spike and the power leaks out, but he's no longer an uncontrolled force of nature. He's a person who happens to be incredibly powerful. He visits Akari and demonstrates, shows her how he can now suppress his presence completely. She can't tell the difference, never could. But he explains that others can now interact with him normally if he wants them to. Akari says she's proud of him, says it took real courage to go to therapy, to admit he needed help. That's harder than asking out 100 girls. Kenji agrees, asks if her answer might be different now that he has some control, now that he's working on himself. Akari smiles, says she'll think about it, but she reminds him that her earlier rejection wasn't because of his power. She genuinely values friendship, doesn't want to risk it. Kenji understands, says he values it too, and he means it, because Akari's friendship is the most genuine connection he's had in years, more valuable than any romantic relationship based on his power or looks. Real quick, before we get to whether Kenji finally finds genuine love or ends up alone forever despite being the most powerful being alive, drop a like if you're still invested in this journey, subscribe so you don't miss the conclusion, and comment what you'd do if you had a power that made your main goal impossible. Now, let's see how this resolves. 2 years pass. Kenji is now 27 and has achieved a strange balance. He lives partly as Guardian, the superhero who saves the world, and partly as Kenji, a normal guy who goes to therapy and hangs out at libraries. His control over his presence has improved. He can interact with normal people most of the time, though strong emotions still cause spikes. He's accepted that he'll never be completely normal, will always be too powerful, but he can at least fake normal for short periods. He dates occasionally, women who know about his power, who are attracted to him for who he is rather than what he is. It never works out long term. The power difference is too great. They try, but eventually they feel overwhelmed, inferior. The relationship dynamics don't work when one person can literally move mountains. Kenji doesn't blame them. He understands. You can't have equal partnership when one partner is a demigod. The power imbalance is too fundamental. He and Akari remain friends, best friends. She's dating someone now, a kind man who treats her well. Kenji is happy for her, genuinely. She deserves love, even if that love isn't with him. But he still wonders sometimes what if? What if he'd never developed the power? What if he'd stayed average? Would they be together? Would he be happier? He'll never know. That timeline doesn't exist. He's trapped in this one, where he's all powerful and all alone. Then something changes. A new super appears, another person with impossible power. She calls herself Zenith. She can manipulate probability, make unlikely things certain, make certain things impossible. She's been using her power for good, but she's running into the same problem Kenji did. Her power is isolating her, making normal relationships impossible. She reaches out to Kenji, asks to meet. They sit on a mountain peak together, two beings powerful enough to reshape reality. They talk for hours about loneliness, about power, about the cost of strength. Kenji finds himself being more open than he's been with anyone except his therapist. Zenith shares her own struggles, how her power makes people distrust her, how probability manipulation means people think she's cheating at life, how she can never know if good things happen to her naturally or because her power unconsciously altered probability. They're different powers, different problems, but the same core issue: too much power, too much isolation, too much strength to ever be vulnerable. Kenji tells her about his power source, the rejections, how he can't grow anymore because he's too powerful to be rejected genuinely. Zenith laughs, says she could reject him, could manipulate probability so she's immune to his presence, genuinely doesn't feel attraction even if her subconscious should. Kenji asks if she's serious. Zenith shrugs, says she could do it, but should she? Does he really want more power? Does he think more strength will solve his problems? Kenji considers, realizes she's right. More power won't help, won't fix his loneliness, won't make connections easier. He's been chasing strength for 10 years. It's never made him happier, only more isolated. He tells Zenith no. He doesn't want her rejection, doesn't want more power. He wants what he can't have: normalcy, connection, love. Zenith says she understands. She wants the same, and maybe that's enough. Maybe two lonely, powerful beings can be lonely together, make each other less alone. It's not romantic, not at first, but they start spending time together. Two people who understand what it's like to be too strong, who don't feel weak next to each other, who can be fully themselves without hiding. Months pass. Their friendship deepens. Kenji finds himself happier than he's been in years. Zenith feels the same. They're not dating, not officially, but they're together in ways that matter. Partners, companions, two people against the loneliness that power brings. Then one day, Zenith asks, would he want to try dating, officially? She knows he wanted to date Akari. That rejection meant something, but maybe this could mean something too, something different. Not because she can't reject him, but because she chooses not to. Kenji says yes. They start dating. It's strange, awkward. Neither has had a successful relationship. Both are carrying trauma from their powers, but they try. They work at it, see therapists together, learn how to be partners, and slowly, surprisingly, it works. Not perfectly. They have fights, misunderstandings, problems that come from being ridiculously overpowered, but they work through them because they both understand what's at stake. Understand how rare it is to find someone who can handle your true self. 3 years into their relationship, Zenith asks Kenji to marry her. He says yes immediately. They have a small wedding, just close friends. Akari is there, Dr. Park is there, a few other supers who understand. It's simple, beautiful. The marriage of two people who thought they'd be alone forever. Kenji realizes something on his wedding day. He never got the final rejection he thought he needed, never maxed out his power completely. But he doesn't care anymore, because he learned something more important than power. That strength isn't about being invincible. It's about being vulnerable with the right person, about letting someone see your weakness, about choosing connection over isolation, even when isolation is safer. His power came from rejection, from closed doors, but his happiness came from acceptance, from open hearts. He spent years thinking rejection made him strong, but the real strength was in continuing to ask despite rejection, in refusing to give up on connection, in being willing to be hurt again and again for the chance at something real. That's power nothing can multiply. The ability to remain open, to keep trying, to refuse isolation, even when isolation is easier. Kenji and Zenith build a life together. Help other powerful individuals cope with isolation. Create support groups, therapy programs. They use their strength to protect humanity, but they use their vulnerability to connect with each other. And that connection matters more than all the power in the world. The man who got stronger with every rejection, who became too powerful to find love, who thought he'd be alone forever, found someone who chose to stay, not because his power overwhelmed her, but because his humanity reached her. In the end, it wasn't about finding someone who could reject him. It was about finding someone who wouldn't, not because they couldn't, but because they saw him, really saw him. Saw past the power to the lonely teenager who just wanted to be enough. Saw past the godlike strength to the vulnerable human who just wanted connection, and chose him anyway. That's what Kenji learned. That acceptance, real acceptance from someone who truly sees you, is worth infinitely more than all the strength rejection ever gave him. His power multiplied with every no, but his life only started when someone said yes, and meant it. Not yes to the power, not yes to the strength, but yes to him. To Kenji, the average guy who became extraordinary, the lonely hero who found love, the man who got too strong to find a girlfriend, until he met someone strong enough to understand what that strength cost, someone who shared that burden, someone who said yes when she could have said no. And in that yes, Kenji found what all his power never gave him: peace, connection, love, the journey from weakest to strongest, from rejected to accepted, from alone to together. That's Kenji's story. The man whose power made love impossible, until he learned that power was never the point. Connection was, vulnerability was, being seen was. And once he understood that, once he stopped chasing strength and started seeking understanding, he found everything he actually needed, not through rejection, but through acceptance, not through multiplication of power, but through division of burden, not through being strongest, but through being honest. That's the real power. The one that doesn't multiply with rejection, but grows with every genuine connection, every honest conversation, every moment of shared vulnerability. Kenji learned it the hard way, spent years trapped by his own strength, but he learned it, and in learning it, he became truly powerful. Not because he could move mountains, but because he could move hearts, starting with his own. The teenager who got rejected 24 times and discovered a superpower, who farmed rejections for strength, who became too powerful for normal life, who thought he'd be alone forever, found love, found partnership, found someone who saw him as Kenji, not as guardian, not as the most powerful being alive, just as Kenji, a man who wanted to be seen, to be known, to be loved, and finally was. That's the ending. Not tragic, not lonely, but hopeful, proving that no matter how strong you become, no matter how isolated power makes you, connection is still possible. Love is still possible. You just have to be willing to be vulnerable, to ask, to risk rejection, not for the power it brings, but for the chance, however small, that someone might say yes, and mean it. That's what Kenji found. After years of rejection leading to strength, he found acceptance leading to happiness. The power to reshape reality couldn't make him happy, but the courage to open his heart did. That's real strength, that's real power, and that's what saved him. Not from threats, not from danger, but from loneliness, from isolation, from the prison his own power created. Love broke those chains. Acceptance opened that door. Connection freed him, and he finally understood. His power wasn't his strength. His humanity was, always had been, always would be. The man who multiplied power through rejection, found meaning through acceptance, and lived not as the strongest being alive, but as a man, in love, happy, free, finally home. But the story of Kenji and his rejection-powered strength doesn't end with a happy marriage. 5 years after their wedding, something unprecedented happens. A global crisis emerges that requires both Kenji and Zenith's full power. An alien entity arrives on Earth, not hostile initially, just curious, but its mere presence is destabilizing reality. The entity exists on a dimensional frequency that's incompatible with Earth's physical laws, like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. Except the peg is the size of a continent and the hole is reality itself. Governments contact Kenji and Zenith. They're the only beings powerful enough to potentially deal with this. Kenji examines the entity. It's not malicious, just confused. It accidentally fell through dimensions and doesn't know how to return. But while it's here, its presence is slowly unraveling causality. Effects are happening before causes. Time is running backwards in some areas. Physics is becoming optional. Kenji tries to communicate. The entity responds. It says it's sorry. It didn't mean to cause harm. It's just lost. Can they help it get home? Kenji and Zenith confer. Zenith can manipulate probability, but she can't manipulate dimensional barriers. Kenji is strong enough to punch holes in reality, but he doesn't know where to punch. They need help. They gather other supers. A woman who can see across dimensions. A man who can manipulate space. A teenager who can calculate impossible equations instinctively. Together, they form a plan. They'll create a dimensional rift, large enough for the entity to return home. But maintaining that rift will require immense power. More power than Kenji currently has. He needs to multiply his strength. Needs another rejection. Zenith realizes what this means. She could reject him. Use her probability manipulation to make herself genuinely uninterested. Trigger his power multiplication one more time. It would give him enough strength to hold the rift open, but it would also destroy their relationship. You can't genuinely reject someone and then take it back. The rejection would be real, permanent. Their marriage would end. Kenji says no. He won't sacrifice their relationship. There has to be another way. But the dimensional seer says there isn't. The entity needs to leave within 48 hours, or reality collapses completely. Everyone on Earth dies. 7 billion lives versus one marriage. The math is cruel but clear. Zenith says she'll do it. Kenji begs her not to. She says she has to. She married him knowing he was a hero, knowing he'd sacrifice for others. She has to do the same. With tears streaming down her face, Zenith manipulates probability, makes herself genuinely fall out of love, makes herself see Kenji as a friend, nothing more. Then she tells him she can't be married to him anymore, doesn't love him romantically, wants a divorce. Kenji feels the words hit like physical blows, feels the power surge. The multiplication happens. His strength doubles, then doubles again, then again. Zenith didn't just reject him, she rejected everything they built. 5 years of marriage, of partnership, of love. It's the most complete rejection possible. Kenji's power explodes. He becomes strong enough to hold dimensional rifts, strong enough to push the entity home, strong enough to save Earth. But the cost is everything that made saving Earth worthwhile. He performs the task mechanically, holds the rift. The entity thanks him, returns home. Reality stabilizes. Earth is saved. 7 billion people celebrate. Kenji collapses, not from exhaustion, from grief. Zenith approaches, tries to comfort him, but he can see it in her eyes. The manipulation worked too well. She really doesn't love him anymore. The rejection was too genuine. She says she's sorry. She did what she had to. He says he knows, doesn't blame her, but it doesn't change what's lost. They divorce quietly. No drama, no bitterness, just two people who loved each other until one had to stop. The superhero community is devastated. Kenji and Zenith were proof that powerful beings could find love, could build lives. Their breakup feels like the death of hope. Kenji retreats into isolation again, back to uninhabited islands, back to helping humanity from a distance, back to being too powerful to connect. He's stronger now than he's ever been, can manipulate fundamental forces, can rewrite physics with effort. He's essentially a god, and more alone than when he was 17. Dr. Park reaches out, offers therapy. Kenji refuses initially, says there's no point. His problem isn't psychological, it's practical. He's too powerful. But Dr. Park insists, says that's exactly why he needs help. That power without support leads to catastrophe. Kenji reluctantly agrees, starts therapy again, talks about the divorce, about Zenith, about how saving the world cost him everything he cared about. Dr. Park asks if he regrets it. Kenji says no. 7 billion lives matter, but he wishes there had been another way. Dr. Park says there's always another way. He just couldn't see it in the moment. Kenji asks what other way. The entity needed immense power. He was the only source. Dr. Park says power comes from multiple sources. He focused on his rejection-based multiplication. But what about combining powers? What if multiple supers worked together? Kenji realizes she's right. He didn't need to be strong enough alone. He needed to coordinate, to delegate, to trust others. But he was so used to being the strongest that he defaulted to carrying everything himself. That habit cost him his marriage. Dr. Park says this is a pattern. He gets power from rejection. So subconsciously, he creates situations where rejection happens, where he's alone, where he has to be strongest. He's been self-sabotaging without realizing it. Kenji sits with this revelation, realizes it's true. He farmed rejections as a teenager, accidentally isolated himself with power, found love, then immediately jumped to sacrificing that love for more power. He's addicted to strength, to being needed, to being the only one who can help. That addiction is destroying his life. Over the next year, Kenji works on this in therapy, learns to delegate, to trust others, to not always be the strongest person in the room. It's harder than fighting cosmic threats, harder than holding dimensional rifts, because it requires admitting he doesn't have to carry everything. That being needed isn't the same as being valued. He starts attending super support groups, meets others with similar struggles, hears their stories, shares his own, learns he's not alone in this. That power and loneliness often come together, that many heroes struggle with connection. One person in the group is a woman named Riley. She has the power to absorb and nullify other powers temporarily. She's been rejected by heroes who see her as a threat, by villains who can't use her, by normal people who fear her. She understands being too powerful in the wrong way. Kenji and Riley become friends. Not romantic, just two people who understand each other's struggles, who can talk without pretense. She asks about his power source, the rejection multiplication. Kenji explains the whole history, the systematic farming, the accidental isolation, the tragic irony. Riley asks if he's ever tried rejecting himself. Kenji doesn't understand. Riley explains, his power multiplies when someone rejects him romantically. But what if he rejects his own need for romantic validation? Accepts that being alone isn't failure, that his worth isn't determined by whether someone loves him. Kenji says that's not how his power works. It's triggered by external rejection. Riley says maybe, but maybe the power is more metaphorical than he thinks. Maybe it responds to genuine emotional shifts, to real changes in how he sees himself. Kenji tries it, sits alone, and genuinely accepts that he might be single forever, that his power might make relationships impossible, that he's okay anyway, that his worth isn't determined by romance. Nothing happens at first. Then he feels a shift, not a multiplication of power, but a transformation of it. His strength doesn't increase, but it becomes more controlled, more precise. He realizes he can do things he couldn't before, not because he's stronger, but because he's more at peace with his strength. Riley's suggestion worked, not by multiplying power, but by changing his relationship with it. Kenji continues this practice, rejecting his need for external validation, accepting himself as he is. Each time his control improves. His power becomes less overwhelming, more manageable. He's not weaker, but he's not constantly leaking energy, not radiating overwhelming presence. He can exist in normal spaces without disturbing people. 2 years after his divorce, Kenji receives a message from Zenith. She wants to meet. Kenji agrees nervously. They meet at a cafe. Neutral ground. Zenith looks different. Lighter, somehow. She says she's been in therapy too, working through what she did, the sacrifice she made, the life she gave up. She says manipulating her own emotions was the most horrific thing she's ever done, that living without loving him has been torture, that she's been trying to reverse it. Kenji asks if she succeeded. Zenith says partially. She can feel affection for him now, but the romantic love is gone, burned out too completely. She says she's sorry for what she did, for the way she did it, for not finding another way. Kenji says he forgives her, means it. She made an impossible choice, saved the world. He can't blame her for that. Zenith asks if he's okay, if he's found happiness. Kenji says he's working on it, learning to be okay alone, learning that his power doesn't define him. Zenith says she's glad. She wants him to be happy, even if it's not with her. They part as friends, not partners, not lovers, but two people who shared something profound and survived its ending. Kenji returns to his life, his therapy, his self-work. He's not looking for romance anymore, not avoiding it either. Just existing, being. For the first time since he was 17, he's not defined by his relationship status, not constantly aware of being single, not farming rejections or seeking acceptance, just living. 3 years after the divorce, Kenji is 40. He's become a mentor to young supers, helps them navigate their powers, avoid his mistakes. He teaches that strength without wisdom is curse, that power without connection is prison, that being strongest doesn't mean being best. One of his students is a girl named Hana, 18 years old. Her power manifests as perfect memory. She remembers everything she's ever experienced, every conversation, every moment, every feeling. It's making her unable to move on from anything, unable to forget pain. She's drowning in accumulated trauma. Kenji sees himself in her, the way power can become prison. He works with her extensively, teaches her coping mechanisms, helps her find peace with her inability to forget. During their sessions, Hana asks about his love life. He deflects. She persists, says she's curious how someone with his power approaches romance. Kenji admits he doesn't anymore, that he's learned to be okay alone. Hana says that's sad. Someone as kind as him deserves love. Kenji says deserving and achieving are different things. Some people are meant to be alone, not as punishment, just as reality. Hana disagrees, says she thinks he's given up, that he's hiding behind philosophy to avoid being hurt again. Kenji considers this, realizes she might be right. He's been telling himself he's at peace, but maybe he's just scared, afraid to try again, afraid of another rejection multiplying his power and isolating him further. Hana challenges him, says real courage isn't being fearless, it's being afraid and trying anyway. Kenji taught her that. Now she's teaching him back. Kenji decides to try, to open himself to possibility again. He doesn't actively seek romance, but he stops avoiding it, stops reflexively shutting down any potential connection. 6 months later, he meets someone. Her name is Dr. Yuki Sato. She's a researcher studying superpower emergence. She's brilliant, driven, and completely unimpressed by his strength. She sees it as data point, as interesting phenomenon, not as reason to worship or fear. They meet at a conference, talk for hours about power mechanics, about isolation, about the cost of strength. She treats him as colleague, as intellectual equal, not as demigod. It's refreshing. They start corresponding, emails about research, about theories, about life. It's not romantic, not yet, but it's connection, real connection. After a year of friendship, Yuki asks him to dinner, not as research, as a date. She says she's enjoyed getting to know him, wants to know him better. Kenji panics internally. This is the moment. If she rejects him later, his power multiplies. He gets stronger, more isolated. The cycle continues, but he remembers Hana's words. Real courage is trying anyway. He says yes. They date slowly, carefully. Both are cautious. Both have been hurt. Both know this might not work, but they try. Yuki knows about his power source, knows that if she rejects him, he gets stronger. She says that's ridiculous pressure, that knowing she could change his fundamental nature makes the relationship terrifying. Kenji agrees, says maybe they should stop, save her the pressure. Yuki says no, she's not stopping, she's just naming the difficulty. They work through it, acknowledge the pressure, choose to try anyway. Months pass, the relationship deepens. It's not perfect, they fight, disagree, struggle with the power dynamic, but they keep communicating, keep trying. Kenji realizes this is different from Zenith. With Zenith, they bonded over shared isolation, shared power. They were refugees from normalcy finding each other. With Yuki, he's choosing connection despite the risk, choosing vulnerability despite the potential cost. That choice matters more than the outcome. 2 years into dating, Yuki asks the question. She says she loves him, but she needs to know if this doesn't work out, if they break up. Will he be okay? Or will the rejection destroy him? Kenji thinks carefully. Says honestly, rejection will hurt, will multiply his power, will probably isolate him further, but he'll survive. He's learned he can survive anything. That survival isn't the same as thriving, but it's enough. Yuki says that's not enough. She wants him to thrive, wants him to be happy, with or without her. Kenji says he's working on it, that therapy helps, that he's learning to find worth beyond relationships, beyond power, beyond being needed. He's learning to just be. Yuki says that's good, that she needs him to have that foundation, because she can't be his only source of happiness. That's too much pressure. Kenji agrees, says he doesn't want her to be, wants her to be part of his life, not all of it. They marry the following year. Small ceremony, just close friends and family. No press, no superhero spectacle, just two people choosing each other. Kenji's vows are simple. He promises to keep working on himself, to never make her responsible for his happiness, to remember that love is choice, not destiny. Yuki promises the same, promises to see him as Kenji, not as guardian, not as the strongest being alive, just as the man she chose. They build a life together. It's not always easy. Kenji's power still causes problems. His presence still affects people. But he's learned to control it better, to seem normal when it matters. And Yuki accepts the parts he can't control, doesn't try to fix him, just loves him as he is. 5 years into their marriage, Yuki gets pregnant. Kenji is terrified. What if the child inherits his power? What if they're born too strong to touch, to hold? What if his curse continues? Dr. Park helps him through the anxiety, reminds him that he's not his power, that whatever the child inherits, they'll face together. The baby is born healthy, normal strength, no signs of power. Kenji is relieved, guilty about being relieved, but relieved. His daughter, Mika, grows up normal. She goes to regular school, has regular friends, lives regular life, knowing her father is guardian, knowing he's impossibly strong, but seeing him primarily as dad, as the man who makes terrible jokes and burns breakfast. Kenji learns something profound from fatherhood, that his identity isn't his strength, isn't his power, isn't his tragic backstory. He's just a person who happens to be strong, who happens to have suffered, but also happens to have found love, found family, found purpose beyond power. The rejection that fueled his strength shaped him, but it doesn't define him. He chooses what defines him now, and he chooses connection over isolation, vulnerability over strength, love over power. Every day he makes that choice. Every day he wakes up next to Yuki. Every day he watches Mika grow. Every day he mentors young supers. He's choosing what matters, what really matters. Not strength, not power, not being strongest, but being present, being real, being himself. The teenager who got stronger with every rejection, who became too powerful to find love, who thought he'd be alone forever, found everything he needed, not through power, but through persistence, through therapy, through self-work, through refusing to give up on connection even when connection seemed impossible. That's Kenji's real story. Not about a man who got strong through rejection, but about a man who learned that strength was never the point. That connection was the point. That love was the point. That being seen and known and accepted was the point. His power multiplied with every rejection, but his life only truly began when he learned to accept himself, to reject the narrative that he was too strong to be loved, to embrace the vulnerability that made love possible. That's real strength. The strength to be weak, to need someone, to let them in despite the risk. Kenji mastered that strength. Not at 17 when he first got his power, not at 25 when he married Zenith, but at 45, married to Yuki, raising Mika, living a life he once thought impossible. That's when he became truly strong. Not because he could move planets, but because he could be moved by his daughter's laughter, by his wife's love, by the simple, profound joy of being known. The most powerful being on earth learned the most important lesson. That power means nothing without connection. That strength means nothing without love. That being able to do anything means nothing if you have no one to share it with. He learned it through pain, through rejection, through loneliness, through terrible mistakes and hard-won growth, but he learned it. And in learning it, he became not the strongest being alive, but the happiest, because he finally understood. His power multiplied with rejection, but his joy multiplied with acceptance. And acceptance, real acceptance, was worth infinitely more than any power rejection could give. That's the truth rejection taught him. Not that he needed to be stronger, but that he needed to be braver. Brave enough to keep trying despite rejection. Brave enough to stay vulnerable despite pain. Brave enough to choose love despite the risk. That bravery, that persistence, that refusal to give up on connection, that's what saved him. Not his power, his humanity. The part of him that wanted to be seen, known, loved. That part survived everything. All the power, all the isolation, all the pain. And in the end, it won. Not through strength, but through stubborn, insistent hope. That connection is possible. That love is possible. That even the loneliest person can find home. Kenji found his home. Not in power, not in strength, but in the messy, beautiful, complicated reality of loving and being loved. Of being father and husband and friend and mentor. Of being Kenji, just Kenji, who happens to be the strongest being on earth, but more importantly, happens to be happy. Finally, impossibly, eternally happy. That's his story. That's his truth. That's what he learned. Power through rejection. Happiness through acceptance. Life through connection. And love, real love, through the courage to keep trying. Even when rejection seems certain. Even when isolation seems inevitable. Even when hope seems foolish. Keep trying. Keep connecting. Keep choosing vulnerability. Because the alternative is strength without purpose. Power without meaning. Victory without joy. And who wants that? Not Kenji. Not anymore. He chose connection. He chose love. He chose life. And life, messy and complicated and sometimes painful as it is, chose him back. That's the ending. That's the truth. That's the story of the man who got stronger with every rejection and learned that acceptance was the real power all along. 20 years after finding his happiness, Kenji faces a new challenge that tests everything he's learned. Mika, now 20, develops powers. Not his multiplication through rejection, something different. She can sense emotional pain in others, feel their loneliness, their isolation, their suffering. It's overwhelming her. She can't filter it out, can't turn it off. Every person she passes on the street, she feels their hurt. It's destroying her mentally. Kenji watches his daughter struggle and sees his younger self. Different power, same isolation, same pain. He tries to help, uses everything he learned. Therapy, support groups, coping mechanisms. But Mika's power is different from his. What worked for him doesn't work for her. She needs her own path. Kenji has to accept something difficult. He can't save his daughter, can't use his strength to fix this. He can only support her while she finds her own way. It's harder than any fight, harder than holding dimensional rifts, because he's powerless, just a father watching his child suffer, unable to stop it. Yuki helps him through it, reminds him that parenting isn't about fixing, it's about being present, about showing love even when you can't solve problems. Kenji struggles with this. His whole life has been about solving problems through power, but this problem needs patience, presence, not power. Mika works through her abilities over years, finds a therapist who specializes in empathic powers, learns to shield, to filter, to manage the overwhelming input. Kenji watches from the sidelines, offers support when asked, steps back when needed, learns that sometimes strength means not using your strength, means letting others struggle, grow, find their own power. It's a different lesson than he expected, but an important one, that being strongest doesn't mean carrying everyone. Sometimes it means trusting them to carry themselves. Mika eventually masters her power, becomes a therapist herself, helps others with empathic abilities, uses her pain to understand others' pain, turns her curse into calling. Kenji is proud beyond words, proud that she took something difficult and made it meaningful, that she didn't let it define her, that she chose purpose over victimhood, just like he eventually did. Watching her succeed, Kenji realizes something. His power through rejection taught him hard lessons, but those lessons made him capable of raising a daughter who could handle her own difficult power. The pain wasn't wasted, the isolation wasn't meaningless. It prepared him for this, for being the father Mika needed. That realization brings peace. His suffering had purpose beyond him. It equipped him to help the next generation, to break cycles instead of perpetuating them. At 60, Kenji is still guardian, still the strongest being on Earth, still called upon when cosmic threats emerge. But it's not his primary identity anymore. He's Yuki's husband first, Mika's father, mentor to young supers, friend to people who knew him before power defined him. Guardian is just what he does, not who he is. This distinction took 40 years to learn, but it changes everything. His power doesn't control his life, doesn't define his worth, doesn't determine his happiness. It's just a thing he has, like brown eyes or height. Part of him, but not all of him. He wonders sometimes what 17-year-old Kenji would think. That boy who started farming rejections for strength, who thought power was the answer, who believed being strongest would make him happy. Would he understand? Would he believe that the real answer was accepting yourself regardless of power? Probably not. 17-year-old Kenji was too hurt, too desperate, too convinced that being average was the problem. He needed to learn the hard way, through multiplication, through isolation, through losing everything. Only then could he appreciate what really mattered. Kenji doesn't regret the journey. It was necessary, but he's grateful it's over, that he's not still chasing power, still farming rejections, still believing that strength equals worth. He learned better. Finally, after decades, he learned that connection is strength, that vulnerability is power, that being known is better than being strongest. These truths seem obvious now, but they were earned, through pain, through mistakes, through hard-won growth. At 70, Kenji retires from active hero work. He's still the most powerful being alive, but younger heroes have risen, capable people who can handle threats. He doesn't need to be first response anymore, can finally rest. He and Yuki travel, see the world, not as guardian and companion, but as two people enjoying life. They visit places he once saved, see them thriving, see people living without knowing he existed. That anonymity is precious, proof that he's not needed, that the world continues without him, that he can just be Kenji. Mika has grandchildren now, Kenji's grandchildren. They're normal, no powers, just regular kids. Kenji is relieved, grateful. The cycle of power and isolation stops with his generation. His grandchildren will never know what it's like to be too strong to connect. They'll have normal lives, normal problems, normal joys. That's the best gift he could give them. At 80, Kenji's power remains. Immortality wasn't part of his ability set, but extreme durability was. He's aging slower than normal humans. Will likely live centuries. Yuki is aging normally. It's becoming visible, the gap between them growing. They don't talk about it much, but it's there. The knowledge that she'll die while he continues, that he'll lose her, that his power will keep him alive long after everyone he loves is gone. It's the final cruelty of his strength, that he can't choose to age with her, can't choose mortality, is stuck being strong forever. Kenji asks Mika if she knows any way to remove powers, to become normal. Mika asks why. He explains he wants to grow old with Yuki, to die when she dies, to not be immortal alone. Mika says she'll research it, but she's not hopeful. Powers are fundamental, part of your identity. Removing them might remove you. Kenji says he's willing to risk it, willing to give up everything for mortality, for the chance to end when his life should end. Mika understands, spends years researching, consulting experts, exploring options, finally finds something. Not removal, but transference. He could give his power to someone else, transfer it completely, become normal. The catch is it would need to be willing, both parties consenting, and the recipient would gain all his power, all his strength, would become him in ability, if not identity. Kenji considers this. Who would he give ultimate power to? Who could he trust with that responsibility? He thinks through options. Other heroes, his students, Mika, all reject the idea. Say they don't want that power, don't want that burden. Then Kenji meets someone unexpected. A young man named Ryu, 20 years old, dying of terminal illness, weak, fragile, desperate. Ryu heard about Kenji's search, approached him, said he'd take the power, would use it well, would carry the burden. Kenji investigates Ryu's character, his history, his values, finds someone genuinely good, someone who wants to help, who would use power responsibly, but is desperate enough to accept it. Kenji talks to Yuki, to Mika, to Dr. Park. Everyone agrees. This could work. It's risky, but it could work. Ryu could become guardian. Kenji could become normal. The ritual is performed. Ancient magic. Expensive. Dangerous, but successful. Kenji's power transfers to Ryu. The young man's terminal illness is cured instantly. His body remade by the power. He becomes what Kenji was: strong, fast, durable, immortal, overwhelmingly powerful. Kenji becomes normal, fully human, mortal, aging, weak. It's disorienting, terrifying, wonderful. For the first time in 60 years, he's average, unremarkable. The thing he ran from at 17, the thing he finally embraced at 80, he teaches Ryu everything: how to control the power, how to avoid isolation, how to maintain connection despite strength. Ryu listens carefully, takes notes, promises to do better than Kenji did, to learn from his mistakes. Kenji believes him, passes the torch, steps back, becomes just Kenji. No guardian, no hero, just an old man who once had power, who gave it up for love. Yuki asks if he regrets it. Kenji says no, never. He's finally free. Free to age, to weaken, to be mortal, to die when it's time. That freedom is worth more than all the power he had. They live their final years together, quietly, peacefully. Two old people enjoying simple things. Yuki dies at 95. Kenji is 98. He holds her hand as she passes. Grateful he's there. Grateful he could stay. Grateful he chose mortality. After her death, Kenji lives a few more years. Quiet years. Spending time with Mika, with grandchildren, with friends. He's not sad, not desperate, just ready. Ready to rest, ready to finish, ready to be done. When Kenji dies at 103, he dies as he lived his last years. Human, normal, connected. Not the strongest being alive, just a person who learned what strength really means. His funeral is small, private, just family and close friends. No press, no superhero memorial. Just people who knew Kenji, not Guardian, Kenji. The man who got stronger with every rejection, who became too powerful to find love, who learned that power wasn't the answer, who gave up immortality for mortality, who chose connection over strength. Ryu attends, now Guardian, carrying the power Kenji transferred. He gives a eulogy, says Kenji taught him the most important lesson. That power is responsibility. That strength is choice. That being strongest means knowing when to be weak. That lesson will guide Ryu for centuries, through countless challenges, through his own struggles with isolation and connection. He'll remember Kenji. Remember the man who had ultimate power and gave it up, who chose love over strength, who proved that real power is choice. The story of Kenji Matsuda ends not with ultimate strength, but with human weakness, not with cosmic power, but with mortal love, not with being remembered as Guardian, but with being mourned as Kenji, husband, father, grandfather, friend, man. That's the ending he earned, the ending he chose, the ending that makes all the rejection, all the power, all the isolation, all the struggle worth it. Because in the end, he got what he always wanted. Not strength, not to be remarkable, but to be seen, known, loved, for himself, as Kenji, just Kenji. And that was enough. That was everything. That was the real power all along. But the legacy of Kenji Matsuda doesn't end with his death. 50 years later, Ryu is still Guardian, still carrying the power Kenji gave him, still protecting Earth. He's faced everything Kenji predicted: the isolation, the loneliness, the struggle to connect when you're too powerful. But he has advantages Kenji didn't. He has Kenji's documented experiences, his therapy notes, his warnings, his hard-won wisdom. Ryu uses all of it, stays in therapy from day one, builds support systems immediately, refuses to let power isolate him, and it works. Not perfectly. He still struggles, still feels alone sometimes. But he manages better than Kenji did. Doesn't wait 60 years to find peace. Finds it in 20. He writes about Kenji, documents the story, not as hero worship, but as cautionary tale, about power and isolation, about strength and loneliness, about the cost of being strongest. The story becomes famous, required reading for young supers, a case study in how power can destroy you if you're not careful, how strength without support leads to catastrophe. Universities teach courses on Kenji's life, analyze his decisions, his mistakes, his eventual growth. He becomes example of both what to do and what to avoid. The rejection power multiplication becomes theoretical framework, studied by psychologists, by power researchers, by people trying to understand how abilities interact with mental health. They discover that Kenji wasn't unique, that many powers have psychological triggers. That trauma and ability are often intertwined. His case opens entire fields of research, leads to better support for powered individuals, better intervention, better understanding. Kenji's suffering becomes meaningful beyond his own life, helps millions of others avoid his mistakes. One researcher, Dr. Sarah Chen, writes a definitive biography, spends years interviewing everyone who knew him: Mika, Ryu, former students, Dr. Park's successors. She pieces together a complete picture. Not sanitized hero story, but honest accounting. The rejection farming, the isolation, the failed relationships, the divorce, the eventual peace, the choice to give up power for mortality. The book, titled Multiplication, the Kenji Matsuda story, becomes bestseller. Not because it's inspiring, though parts are, but because it's honest. Shows someone powerful struggling, failing, growing, eventually succeeding not through strength but through vulnerability. Critics argue about the book. Some say it humanizes Kenji too much, makes him too relatable when he was literally strongest being alive. Others say it doesn't humanize him enough, focuses too much on power and not enough on person. Sarah Chen defends her work, says Kenji was both, was powerful and human, was strongest and loneliest, was guardian and just Kenji. That duality was the point. That's what people need to understand. That power doesn't erase humanity, doesn't solve problems, sometimes creates them. 100 years after Kenji's death, a movement emerges. People voluntarily choosing to limit their powers, to suppress abilities, to live more normally. They call themselves the constrained. They're inspired by Kenji's choice to give up power, to choose mortality. They see it as wisdom, not weakness. The movement is controversial. Many see it as waste, as squandering gifts. But the constrained argue that power isn't always gift. Sometimes it's curse, that choosing limitation is valid, that you don't owe the world your strength. Ryu speaks publicly about the movement, says he understands it, that if he could give up power again, return to being normal Ryu before the transfer, he might. That carrying this strength is burden, not blessing. His honesty shocks people. Guardian, the most powerful hero, admits he'd give it up. That admission changes the conversation, makes people question assumptions about power and happiness. 200 years after Kenji's death, society has completely changed how it views powered individuals. They're no longer automatically heroes, no longer assumed to be happy with their abilities. They're seen as people, some of whom have gifts, some of whom have curses, some of whom struggle, all of whom deserve support. This shift traces directly back to Kenji, to his documented struggles, to his willingness to be honest about isolation, to his choice to give up power. He became template for different kind of hero, one who's honest about struggling, who admits power isn't always good, who chooses humanity over strength. Mika, who lived to 140 thanks to her own power's effects, wrote her own book before dying. My father was the strongest man alive, and that nearly destroyed him. In it, she details growing up with Kenji, seeing him struggle with power, watching him find peace, learning from both his mistakes and successes. She writes that people often asked if she resented her father's power, if it made her childhood difficult. She always answered the same way: yes and no. Yes, his power caused problems, isolation, attention, danger. But no, she wouldn't change it, because his power taught him lessons, hard lessons. That made him better father, better person. His suffering had purpose, made him capable of helping her through her own power struggles. That's the real legacy, not the strength, but the wisdom gained through struggling with strength. The 300-year anniversary of Kenji's birth is marked worldwide. Celebrations, memorials, discussions. People reflect on his impact, how one person's documented struggle changed society's relationship with power, how honesty about weakness became strength, how choosing vulnerability became courage. Ryu, still alive, still guardian, gives a speech. He's now 300 years old, has carried Kenji's power for 200 years, longer than Kenji had it. He talks about the weight, the isolation, the struggle. He talks about wanting to give it up, to pass it to someone else, to become normal. He's looking for successor, someone who can carry this burden, someone who understands what they're accepting. He frames it as Kenji did, not as gift, as responsibility, as burden, as sacrifice. Several people volunteer. He interviews them all, chooses carefully, eventually selects someone, a woman named Arya. She's terminally ill like Ryu was, wants purpose before she dies, wants to matter. Ryu transfers the power, becomes normal. The first thing he does is cry, with relief, with joy, with freedom. He's finally released, finally normal, finally mortal. Arya takes up the mantle, becomes guardian. Third in the line that started with Kenji. She promises to honor the tradition, to document her struggles, to be honest about the cost, to remember that power is burden, not blessing. The cycle continues. Guardian protecting Earth, struggling with isolation, eventually passing the power to another, each one learning from the last, each one slightly better at managing the burden, each one tracing their approach back to Kenji, to the man who first documented the cost of strength. 500 years after Kenji's death, his name is still known, still taught, still referenced, not as distant legend, but as relevant example. Humanity has spread to stars, powers have evolved, new abilities emerged, but the core truth Kenji taught remains. Power without connection is prison. Strength without support is curse. Being strongest doesn't mean being happiest. These truths echo through centuries, through civilizations, through species that humanity encounters in space. Aliens study Kenji's case, find it universal. The isolation of power, the loneliness of strength, the cost of being exceptional. It's not just human experience, it's sentient experience, common across species. Kenji's documented struggle becomes bridge, proof that despite differences, all conscious beings face similar challenges, that power isolates, that connection matters, that being seen is universal need. 1,000 years after Kenji's death, Earth builds memorial, not monument to his strength, but to his honesty. Simple building, library containing everything about him, his story, his struggles, his therapy notes, his journals, all publicly available. The memorial's inscription reads, Kenji Matsuda, strongest being on Earth, loneliest man alive, until he learned that connection was the real power. May we all learn faster than he did. That's his legacy. Not strength, but lesson. That power means nothing without connection. That being strongest doesn't matter if you're alone. That real courage is vulnerability. That's what humanity remembers. Not Guardian saving the world, but Kenji learning to be human despite power. That's what inspires. What teaches? What matters? The teenager who got stronger with every rejection, who became too powerful to find love, who thought he'd be alone forever, taught humanity, taught the universe the most important lesson. That power is burden. That strength is curse, unless balanced by connection, by vulnerability, by willingness to be weak. That lesson echoes through 1,000 years, will echo forever. Because Kenji documented everything, was honest about everything, refused to pretend power was blessing when it was curse. That honesty saved millions from his mistakes, helped countless people navigate power more wisely, created better world for powered individuals. That's real power. Not moving mountains, but moving hearts. Not changing physics, but changing minds. Not being strongest, but being honest. Kenji achieved ultimate strength, then gave it up, then died as normal human. That journey, from average to strongest to average again, teaches everything anyone needs to know about power. That it's not the point. That connection is the point. That being seen and known and loved as yourself, not your abilities, is the point. That's what Kenji learned, what he taught, what he proved, through rejection, through multiplication, through isolation, through eventual acceptance. The boy who farmed rejections for strength became man who gave up strength for love, became legend who taught that love was the real strength all along. His story never ends, because the lesson never stops being relevant. Power will always tempt. Strength will always isolate. People will always need to learn. That connection matters more than capability. That vulnerability matters more than strength. That being known matters more than being powerful. Kenji Matsuda, the man whose power multiplied with rejection, who became too strong to find girlfriend, who learned that being too strong was the real problem, who gave up strength for love, who chose mortality for connection, who taught the universe the most important truth. That power without love is prison. That strength without connection is curse. That being strongest without being seen is loneliest existence possible. And that choosing love, choosing connection, choosing to be known, that's the real power, the only power that matters, the power that makes life worth living. That's his gift. That's his truth. That's his eternal legacy. Forever.